Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive with us.
Yes, welcome back.
Today, we're going to be exploring a podcast called Scripture Straight Talk.
Okay.
And specifically, we're going to be looking at 3 kings.
All right.
From 2 Chronicles 13 through 17.
Okay.
Abijah, Asa, and Jehoshaphat.
Sounds good.
Now, get this. One of these kings faced an army twice the size of his own.
Oh, wow.
But guess what?
He won.
He did.
That's amazing.
A pretty amazing story.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into how that happened.
For sure.
But we're really looking at all 3 of these kings and what their stories can teach us about trusting God.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really fascinating about these 3 kings is that it's not just about like their own personal faith.
Right.
It's about how that faith really shapes a nation.
Oh, interesting.
For better or for worse.
Okay.
So it has these like national implications.
That's really cool. So let's start with King Abijah.
Okay.
This is the guy who's facing this massive army, twice the size of his, and he somehow manages to pull off this victory.
Yeah.
Beyond just saying he trusted in God.
Yeah.
How did that actually play out in a practical way?
Well, I think that's where Abijah's speech before the battle becomes so powerful. Because he doesn't just pray for a miracle. He lays out this theological and historical argument to his troops.
Oh, wow.
He's reminding them that they're fighting for the rightful lineage of David.
Okay.
For the covenant that God made with their ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like he's saying,
Right.
Look, our faith isn't just some kind of blind hope.
Right.
It's rooted in like generations of God's faithfulness.
So it's almost like he's using faith as a military strategy.
Yes.
Boosting the morale.
Yeah.
By connecting it to this larger historical narrative.
It's about grounding your actions in something bigger than yourself.
Right.
His trust in God wasn't passive.
Yeah.
It was a driving force behind
Interesting.
his leadership and his strategy.
That's fascinating. I mean, and it clearly worked.
Clearly, yeah.
The guy defeated 500,000 enemy soldiers.
That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
Hard to fathom.
So that's King Abijah.
All right.
But let's move on to his successor, King Asa.
Okay.
Now, he also starts strong. Big win.
Right.
Things get a little complicated, though.
A little bit.
Yeah, his story is really interesting because it shows us that trusting God isn't just this one-time thing.
Yeah.
It's like a lifelong...
Right, a journey with all its twists and turns.
Exactly. And one of those twists is that he makes this decision to rely on human alliances instead of just going straight to God for guidance.
Right.
And that obviously leads to some problems.
Yeah.
What do you think contributed to that shift in his thinking?
Well, it's easy for us to look back and kind of judge Asa, but, imagine the pressure that he was under as a king. He's responsible for his people.
Right.
Maybe he had advisors in his ear telling him to take a more like...
pragmatic approach.
Pragmatic, yeah.
Yeah.
So... I think it's important to remember that trusting God doesn't mean that we just like ignore practical considerations or good advice.
Yeah, so it's not about rejecting logic or strategy.
Right.
It's about incorporating your faith into those decisions.
Absolutely. Seeking God's wisdom, but also taking into account, what people are saying.
The human element.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
It is.
I mean, Asa's story is really a cautionary tale for all of us.
Yeah. Definitely.
Because it shows us that we need to be consistent in our faith.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just when things are good, but also when things are tough.
That's when it's really tested.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, before we get too far into Asa's story, I want to look at a moment where his faith really shines through.
Okay.
And that's his prayer in 2 Chronicles 14.11.
Right.
It says, Lord, it's nothing for you to help us, whether we have a huge army or no army at all. Help us, O Lord our God, for we rest on you. What do you think he means by resting on God?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, is it just about like emotional comfort or is there something deeper there?
I think it's so much deeper than just feeling safe.
Okay.
I think resting on God is about surrender.
Yeah.
It's about saying, okay, God, like your wisdom and your power are so much greater than anything I can comprehend.
Okay.
So I'm going to let go.
Right. So it's almost like stepping back and letting God take over.
Getting go of that control.
Trusting that he's got a plan, even if we can't.
Even when we can't see it.
See the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Which is hard.
It is hard, yeah.
It's not easy to do that.
It's not easy to surrender.
Right.
Especially when you're afraid or things feel uncertain.
Absolutely. And, that kind of brings us back to Asa's
Yes.
later decision
Yeah.
to rely on human alliances.
Right.
It seems like maybe he kind of lost sight of that
It's possible.
resting on God mentality.
Yeah, but I think, instead of just condemning him,
Right.
maybe we can learn from his experience.
Oh, interesting.
Like, his story should challenge us to ask ourselves, like,
Okay.
how do I maintain that sense of surrender?
Right.
How do I keep relying on God,
Yeah.
even when I'm tempted to just, take matters into my own hands?
It's a good question. It's a really good question.
It is. It's a tough question.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
But before we jump back into Asa's story,
Okay.
let's meet our third king,
All right.
Jehoshaphat.
Let's do it.
This guy, total opposite of Asa
Really?
in terms of consistency.
Okay.
He is known for his unwavering dedication to God.
Wow.
And in fact, he was so well respected
Mm-hmm.
that even his enemies brought him gifts.
What? That's crazy.
Right,
That's
right.
unheard of.
That's pretty remarkable.
It is, yeah.
What does that tell us about his leadership?
I mean, I think it really speaks to...
Like his reputation, back then, getting tribute from your enemies was a huge sign of strength.
Okay.
It meant that they, recognized his authority,
Right.
not just militarily,
Right.
but also maybe even morally and spiritually.
Interesting.
They saw that this guy was aligned with a higher power,
Right.
and they didn't want to mess with that.
They were acknowledging a force beyond their control.
Totally.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
What I find so inspiring about Jehoshaphat
Yeah.
is that he didn't hoard his faith.
Oh, interesting.
You know?
Yeah.
He actively shared it with others.
Okay.
He wasn't just focused on his own relationship with God.
Right.
He wanted his entire nation to grow spiritually.
Wow. So how did he go about doing that?
Well, he actually, according to 2 Chronicles 17,
Oh.
he sent officials and Levites all over the country
Oh, wow.
to teach the law to the people.
So he's taking proactive steps
Yeah.
to spread this faith. Exactly. He understood that a nation's strength wasn't just about, its military.
Right.
It was about
It's about the heart of the people.
the heart of the people.
Yeah.
And that's such an important lesson
It is.
for us today, I think.
Absolutely.
Because it shows us that true leadership isn't just about, our own personal success.
Mm-hmm.
It's about helping others to grow.
Yeah. It's about empowering others.
Exactly.
Guiding them.
Yeah.
Helping them to grow.
And bringing them along on this
Yeah.
spiritual journey.
It's about leaving a legacy.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Thanks. It really is. It's about thinking bigger than just yourself and thinking about the people you're leading.
And I think that's something we'll probably come back to
Yeah,
when
definitely.
we talk more about Jehoshaphat.
Yeah, for sure.
But let's circle back to Asa for a second.
Okay.
We were talking about his decision to rely on human alliances.
Right, right.
And the podcast source kind of points out that
Yeah.
that wasn't the best move.
Yeah, not exactly trusting God. Right.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if we could maybe delve a little deeper into the historical context here.
Uh-huh.
Was this a normal thing for kings to do back then?
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, alliances and military strength, those were
Okay.
the hallmarks of a powerful king.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
From that perspective.
Totally. I mean, you can see why Asa might have felt pressured
Right.
to follow that path.
Yeah, to do what everyone else was doing.
Exactly.
But his story kind of challenges us
yeah.
to maybe question
To think differently.
those norms, yeah.
Absolutely.
And think about what it means to really lead with faith.
Yeah, to let your faith guide your decisions,
Right.
even when it's hard.
And it's that tension
Yeah.
between pragmatism and faith that I think a lot of people today
Yeah, for sure.
can relate to.
Absolutely.
Because we're always getting these messages
Totally.
about what it means to be successful.
Right, this is the smart way to do things.
Yeah, this is what you should be doing.
This is how you get ahead.
But sometimes the wisest choice
Yeah.
is the one that
that aligns with your faith.
aligns with your faith, even if it
Even if it seems counterintuitive.
doesn't make sense
Or risky.
to other people, yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of courage
It does.
to go against that, to trust that
Takes gut.
God's got a better plan.
It does. It takes a willingness to surrender.
And that's kind of been a theme
Totally.
throughout this whole conversation.
Yeah.
Abijah standing up against all odds,
Right?
Jehoshaphat choosing spiritual education
Investing in the people.
over military might.
Yeah.
These guys weren't afraid to do
Right.
things differently.
They were pioneers.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, hey, it's okay to challenge the status quo.
Don't be afraid to question things.
Trust God.
To trust that God will honor your commitment to Him.
It's pretty amazing.
It's powerful stuff.
Now, going back to Asa's prayer for a moment.
Okay.
Remember he said, "Help us, O Lord our God, for we rest on you."
It's a beautiful prayer.
It is, and it's so simple.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much depth there.
Layers of meaning.
And it makes me think about what it means to rest in God.
What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean,
What does that feel like?
Yeah.
It's deeper than just asking for help in a crisis.
Okay.
It's about this constant awareness
Right.
that God is with you. It's that underlying peace that you get from knowing you're never alone.
Even when things are really tough.
Yeah, even when things are falling apart around you.
Right. So it's not about just like going to God when things go wrong.
It's not just a fire escape.
It's about an ongoing
It's a relationship.
Where you're constantly
You're tethered to something bigger than yourself.
connected. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that gives you a sense of
Peace, stability.
Yeah.
No matter what's happening around you.
It's almost like having an anchor in a storm.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
That kind of keeps you steady.
Yeah, it keeps you from being swept away.
And that's such a powerful image.
It is, especially in a world that feels so...
Chaotic.
Yeah, chaotic and unpredictable.
It's a good reminder that our faith
Yeah.
isn't just about going to church
Right.
or reading the Bible.
It's about that deep connection with God that impacts every part of your life.
So it's about an inner transformation.
Yes.
More than anything.
Yeah, change in perspective.
That allows you to see the world through a different lens.
Through the lens of faith.
Yeah, even when things are hard.
That's when it really matters.
And that's something we see over and over again.
Totally.
In the stories of these kings.
Yeah, it's not about avoiding hardship. It's about how you face it.
It's about that unwavering trust.
That carries you through.
That gets you through the tough times.
Absolutely.
And that's where these stories become so relevant for us today.
They're so relatable.
Even though their lives were so different.
Yeah, I mean, they were dealing with battles and political intrigue.
Right, stuff that we don't have to deal with.
But at the core, it's the same.
It's the same.
We all face doubts,
fears,
temptations to compromise.
To just rely on ourselves.
Yeah. And these kings show us that there's a better way.
It's like they're saying, we've been there.
We get it.
We've felt those things.
We've been in the trenches.
But we found our way through.
And you can too.
And they give us that practical wisdom.
Yeah, they show us the path.
To lean on God.
Yeah, to seek his guidance.
To use our faith.
To be a light in the world.
Lift others up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's a message.
It's a timeless message.
That's timeless.
Yeah.
No matter what we're going through.
It's always relevant.
Now, before we wrap up
this
whole deep dive
into
these three kings, I wanted to touch on one more thing.
Right.
That I found really interesting.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about their personal faith. But I'm curious about how that faith influenced their leadership styles.
Okay.
Did their belief in God actually affect how they governed their people?
Yeah. Like, did they try to create a more just society based on biblical principles?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is complicated.
Okay.
It's clear that their faith had a huge impact on their decisions.
Go.
Like, for example, Jehoshaphat investing in teaching people about the law.
Right.
That suggests he really wanted to create a society rooted in those principles.
Yeah, so it wasn't just about being personally devout.
Right.
It was about shaping the entire culture.
Exactly.
And even Asa, despite, some of his mistakes,
Uh-huh.
he implemented some religious reforms early on.
Yes, he did.
So it shows that he also wanted his leadership to reflect his faith.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's also important to remember that these kings weren't perfect.
Right.
They made mistakes.
Yeah.
They had their own struggles.
Yeah.
And sometimes they fell short of the ideals they believed in.
So it's a good reminder that faith doesn't make us immune to those human weaknesses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We're all human.
Yeah.
But faith gives us a way to navigate those challenges.
Okay.
To ask for forgiveness and to keep trying to do better.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about that process of growing.
Yeah, it's about progress, not perfection.
And I think that's what makes these stories so relatable, right? They weren't superhuman. They were just regular people.
They wrestled with their faith, just like we do.
Exactly.
Trying to figure out how to live it out in a complicated world.
Which brings us back to, what can we actually learn from this?
Right. What are the takeaways?
We've talked about a lot of different things.
Yeah, we've covered prayer, study, community.
Aligning our actions with our beliefs.
Right.
Are there any other practical things we can take away from these kings?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is courage.
I mean, think about it. Every one of these kings
Mm-hmm.
had moments where they had to make really tough choices.
Right.
Sometimes they went against what everyone else was doing.
Yeah.
Sometimes they faced impossible odds.
Uh-huh.
Their stories challenge us to be bold in our own faith,
Okay.
to stand up for what we believe in,
Even when it's hard.
even when it's unpopular or scary.
So it's about being willing to step outside of our comfort zone,
Absolutely.
trusting that God will be with us,
Yeah, trusting that he'll guide our steps even when we don't know where we're going.
and that courage doesn't always have to be some big dramatic thing.
Right.
It can be in those everyday decisions,
The small choices that make a difference.
choosing to speak up for what's right,
Showing kindness when it's easier to walk away.
just living with integrity even when no one's watching.
Yeah, those little things add up.
Those are the things that really shape the world around us.
And I think another takeaway is the importance of teaching and mentoring. Remember how Jehoshaphat focused on teaching the law to his people?
Yes.
I think we have that same responsibility to share our faith with others.
To guide and inspire them.
Yeah, to create environments where faith can grow.
And that could be through formal teaching or just in our daily interactions with people.
Totally. It can be with your family, your friends, your coworkers.
Just being an example.
It's about realizing that our faith isn't just a private thing.
Right.
It has the power to impact the world around us,
And to inspire positive change.
to create ripples of hope.
That's beautiful.
It is. It really is.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have
We've learned a lot about Abijah, Asa, and Jehoshaphat,
3 very different kings.
but all facing similar challenges.
Yeah,
And finding strength and guidance through their faith.
absolutely.
And I hope that our listeners are walking away from this deep dive
We too.
with a renewed sense of courage,
Yeah.
a stronger faith.
And a deeper understanding of what it means to live a life that's grounded in God.
And we encourage you to keep exploring these ideas.
Yeah, keep digging into the scriptures
To think about how these stories can apply to your own life.
because your story matters.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep growing, and keep trusting in the God who guides our steps.
And remember, you are part of an amazing story.